It started with a knock so loud it made my coffee jump out of the mug. Not a regular knock. This was the kind of knock you only hear in war zones or drug busts. My dog, a retired canine named Reaper, was already at the door, growling low like he'd caught the scent of something rotten. I opened the door in my flannel pajama pants, still barefoot, still half asleep, and that's when I saw them. 2 men in half-baked tactical gear, mismatched boots, knockoff sunglasses, and vests so new they still had the creases from the packaging. One flashed a badge. The other shouted, "You're under arrest for aggressive behavior and violations of Community Safety Code 7.3. I blinked. Then I smiled. Because the last guy who tried that tone on me was holding an AK in Kandahar. And he didn't walk away. They weren't cops. Not even close. Real law enforcement doesn't shout HOA codes. Real cops don't wear vests with Velcro peeling off the edges or carry zip ties in a fanny pack. One of them had a GoPro taped to his helmet with duct tape. I kid you not. He tried to step forward like this was his moment. Reaper lunged. I snapped my fingers and he backed off, but not before the taller one flinched hard enough to hit the stucco wall beside my porch. The other guy tried to play it cool, hand hovering over what looked like a paintball pistol in a fake holster. My instincts kicked in. Not rage. Not panic. Precision. Observation. Training. These weren't threats. These were idiots playing dress-up with the wrong homeowner. I didn't say a word. Just stepped back, letting them think they'd won some imaginary turf war. They pushed inside. Big mistake. You don't walk into a ranger's house uninvited. Especially not one with a history in reconnaissance and close-quarters combat. I had a cane leaning against the wall. Looked decorative. It wasn't. That thing was reinforced oak with a steel core, a gift from my unit after a chopper incident left me with a shattered knee and a medal. I swung once. Center mass. The tall one folded like a chair. His friend spun, raised that toy pistol, and caught a ceramic fruit bowl to the temple. He dropped faster than my last VA claim. They both groaned on the ground, stunned more by the sudden shift in power than the actual pain. Reaper stood between them, tail still, teeth bare, eyes locked. They scrambled to their feet and bolted without a word. One of them left behind a hat that read, "Community Tactical Response." I picked it up and shook my head. Reaper barked once, sharp and satisfied, and then trotted back to his bed like this was just another Tuesday. 10 minutes later, the Queen herself showed up, Patty, head of our HOA, local tyrant, an all-round nosy pest. She waddled up my driveway with a smile that looked like it had been glued on too tight. Her arms were crossed, her little clipboard tucked under one elbow like it gave her special powers. "Well," she said, "I told them you were trouble. You should have just paid the fine, Jason. Now look what you've done." I didn't answer. Just held up my phone and tapped the ring footage. Patty's smile faltered. She saw it, everything. The bogus uniforms, the forced entry, the assault. She didn't know it yet, but her nephews had just committed about 6 federal crimes before breakfast. I let the video loop once before I lowered the phone. "Those were your people?" I asked. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." She turned and stomped away. I watched her go, her sandals slapping against the pavement like angry claps. My neighborhood was quiet again, but the silence wasn't peaceful. It was tense. Loaded. Like the pause between thunderclaps. Because now it was war. I sat on the porch later that afternoon, reviewing the footage. Every frame told a story. The fake badges. The panic in their movements. The lack of coordination. They weren't just fakes, they were amateurs. But amateurs can still be dangerous when emboldened by idiots in charge. And Patty? She was the worst kind of fool, one who thought power came from printed forms and fear tactics. What she didn't know was that I wasn't just ex-military. I was 75th Ranger Regiment. 2 tours. Direct action raids. I've cleared compounds quieter than she runs meetings. And unlike Patty, I knew how to play the long game. Later that evening, I made a few calls. Sheriff Langston was one of the first. He served with my brother, and knew me well enough to take me seriously. I didn't lead with the footage, I led with the phrase, "Fake officers attempted entry." That got his full attention. We set up a meeting. I sent the files. And then I started pulling public records on the HOA itself. I had a hunch this wasn't their first time trying intimidation, just the first time they picked someone with training. What they didn't understand is this wasn't just about me. This was about how far a group of self-important suburban bureaucrats were willing to go to enforce control. They weren't enforcing rules. They were manufacturing them. And this time, they backed it with muscle. Fake, stupid muscle, but still muscle. Which made this a threat. And I don't tolerate threats on my doorstep. That night, I walked the perimeter of my property. Posted new signs. Rechecked my motion sensors. Installed a few decoys, dummy cameras, trip lights, and a freshly placed military-grade drone surveillance active plaque I bought as a joke but now felt perfectly appropriate. Reaper padded alongside me, nose low, ears alert. He knew something was off too. Dogs always know. I didn't sleep much. Didn't need to. Rest is a luxury. Readiness is survival. And after years in forward bases, FOBs, and foreign dirt, I'd learned the value of being underestimated. That was their mistake. Patty and her idiots thought I'd call a lawyer or maybe write a complaint. But Rangers don't complain. We adapt. We outthink. We outmove. And most of all, we hit back. Hard. Tomorrow would be quiet. They'd think I'd calm down. They'd think they scared me. And that's exactly what I wanted. Because when I strike back, I don't shout. I don't knock. I kick the damn door off its hinges. The next morning, I drove down to the sheriff's department with a flash drive and a folder full of screenshots. Langston met me at the front like I was family. That's the thing about small counties. Your name carries weight, especially when it's stitched into a uniform somewhere overseas. He shook my hand without a word and led me into a back office, one of those spaces where the furniture looks like it's been handed down for 2 generations. I slid the flash drive across the desk and opened the folder while his deputy brought in coffee. We watched the footage together. Not once did Langston interrupt. He leaned in, eyes narrowing at every angle. When the taller fake officer shoved my door open, Langston exhaled slowly and said, "That's enough." He stood up, walked to the hallway, and called over his shoulder, "Get Meyer in here!" and called the DA's office. That was my green light. I wasn't just filing a complaint anymore. This was criminal. Langston confirmed what I already knew: impersonating an officer is a felony. Entering a home under false pretenses? That's breaking and entering. Threats of detainment without cause? Kidnapping or damn close to it. Langston made a call to a contact in the county attorney's office. They would initiate an investigation. Meanwhile, he told me to stay quiet, to not stir the pot, and to let them handle it. I nodded, said thanks, and promised to keep things calm on my end. I lied. Not because I didn't trust Langston, but because I didn't trust the HOA to stay in their lane. By noon I was back home, doing my own kind of reconnaissance. I started looking up the names of everyone on the HOA board. Public records are funny things. You'd be surprised how much dirt you can dig up without lifting a shovel. Patty's last name led me straight to 2 mugshots. Her nephews, both with DUIs, one with a prior arrest for disorderly conduct at a nightclub. The best part? One of them had a YouTube channel. Most of it was Jim flexing and tactical cosplay, but one video stood out, him and his buddy doing urban patrol drills in what looked suspiciously like our neighborhood, wearing the same gear they wore when they tried to arrest me. That clip had under 50 views. I watched it 5 times. Next, I pulled up the HOA bylaws. Buried deep in the language was a clause about external security contractors. Any outside personnel used by the HOA for enforcement had to be verified, licensed, and approved by the board in writing. I found nothing. No records. No meeting minutes. No signatures. which meant Patty had acted alone or forged approval. Either way, it was another strike. I compiled everything: screenshots of the YouTube video, property lines they'd crossed, and emails a neighbor quietly forwarded me that showed Patty referring to me as a security threat in camo and encouraging direct HOA enforcement. The words sounded bureaucratic, but in light of what had happened, they read like orders. The next day, I set a trap. Not a physical one. Just bait. I posted a sign near my driveway that read, "Private military property, under surveillance." It was nonsense, legally speaking, but I wanted to see how they'd react. Sure enough, by mid-afternoon, Patty and one of her nephews came walking by, slow and loud, pretending to check community sidewalk regulations. I stood in my garage, cleaning a power washer, pretending not to notice them. The nephew pointed to the sign. Patty said something I couldn't quite hear. They kept walking, but not before pulling out a phone and snapping a picture. That told me everything. They were still trying to build a case against me, still thinking they could spin this in their favor. But they weren't dealing with a neighbor who'd roll over. They were dealing with someone who'd been trained to collect intelligence, apply pressure, and never telegraph a counterattack. That night, I called Matt, a buddy from the Rangers who now ran a drone and security gear company out in Arizona. I told him I needed a favor. Just one flyover. Nothing illegal, just some visual intimidation. Matt laughed and said he'd do it for free as long as I sent him the footage when the HOA scattered. He overnighted me a drone the size of a pizza box, pre-programmed with a circular patrol route and spotlight activation on motion detection. I charged it, set the route, and launched it right before sundown. The buzz echoed over rooftops, bouncing between houses like a warning. A few porch lights flicked on. Curtains shifted. Reaper sat on the porch beside me, ears perked but unbothered. At exactly 8:43 p.m., the drone's spotlight hit someone standing just past my property line. I zoomed in. It was one of the nephews, crouched low, holding something metal, possibly a phone, maybe a flashlight, maybe something worse. He froze when the light caught him. The drone's camera activated a red blinking light and a short pre-recorded message. "Surveillance perimeter breached. Law enforcement notified." He bolted. I didn't notify law enforcement, not yet. I wanted him to sweat. The next morning, I had breakfast on my porch. Two neighbors walked by, both giving me that look. The kind of look that says they know something went down but they don't want to get involved. A third one, an older woman who I'd once helped dig her car out after a flood, stopped and said, "I hope they leave you alone, Jason. You're not like the rest of us. You don't scare easy." I smiled and thanked her. Because that was the difference. I'd seen real fear. Real danger. The HOA wasn't dangerous. They were desperate. And desperate people make mistakes. By early afternoon, Sheriff Langston called me again. The DA's office wanted formal statements. The investigation was active. They had enough to file impersonation charges, and possibly even fraud if they could prove HOA funds were used. Langston asked if I'd be willing to testify. I told him I'd bring popcorn. He laughed. Then he said something that stuck with me. "They picked the wrong guy, didn't they?" I told him they did worse. They picked someone who's patient. That night, I stayed up late reviewing the footage from the drone. I tagged timestamps, pulled clips, and cataloged movement patterns. Reaper snored at my feet while I worked, tail thumping every now and then. Outside, the neighborhood was dark. Peaceful on the surface. But I knew better. The surface was just a mask. Beneath it, the cracks were spreading. And the moment would come when the whole thing would fall apart. When it did, I wouldn't need a lawyer. I'd already done the legwork. I'd already gathered the proof. I wouldn't just shut them down. I'd bury them in their own paperwork. The collapse didn't happen with a bang. It started with a leak. A week after the sheriff's department began its investigation, emails from the HOA board somehow ended up in the inbox of half the neighborhood. The source was anonymous, but the content was crystal clear. Conversations between Patty and the other board members revealed exactly what I suspected. This wasn't a rogue move by one nosy neighbor. This was a coordinated plan. They had voted unofficially to take back control of the community, and I was listed by name in multiple threads as their test case. One board member joked about how fun it would be to watch the ex-military guy get hosed down. Another suggested they try scaring him into compliance before escalating to legal action. The emails were timestamped, signed, and dumb enough to get everyone involved thrown in court just for typing them. By mid-morning, several homes on the block had HOA board members standing nervously on their porches, fielding angry stares and questions from the neighbors. Cars slowed down near Patty's driveway. A few kids rode by on bikes shouting, "Faker patrol!" and laughing. It was the kind of public humiliation that couldn't be undone with a press release or a flyer slipped under doors. People were pissed. They'd been paying dues, following HOA orders, letting themselves be bullied, and now they realized the emperor wasn't just naked, he was also impersonating law enforcement with borrowed muscle and a grudge. Langston called me personally around lunchtime. He told me the DA had decided to press charges against both of Patty's nephews for impersonating peace officers and attempting unlawful detainment. On top of that, there was now an active audit into HOA financial activity, including where the funds had come from to buy the knockoff tactical gear. Patty was listed as the signer on multiple HOA disbursement requests. She hadn't even bothered to hide it. Her confidence had made her sloppy. It always does. Langston also said the county had issued a cease and desist on all HOA enforcement activities until further notice. Which meant for the first time in 5 years, the neighborhood was free. I didn't celebrate. I waited. Because people like Patty don't go quietly. They play victim. They rally their friends. They lie with charm and smile through chaos. Sure enough, she scheduled an emergency HOA meeting. Claimed she'd been misled by her nephews and blamed the whole mess on a miscommunication in authority protocols. She even passed around a fake resignation letter from one of the other board members, trying to deflect attention. But this wasn't a crowd she could spin anymore. People came in angry, not curious. They shouted over her. They demanded real resignations. One man stood up and read the email where she called a disabled neighbor a code violation with legs. That shut the room down. I watched from the back. Said nothing. Just listened. And when the floor was opened for public comment, I stepped forward. The room went quiet. Even Patty's mouth snapped shut. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat. I just laid out the facts. 2 armed men tried to enter my home under false legal authority. Those men were related to the HOA chair. The HOA funded them, encouraged them, and conspired against residents. I told them about the motion sensor footage, the emails, the fake security claims. I didn't tell them about my training or what I could have done if I hadn't held back. I didn't need to. They got the message. By the time I stepped down, the crowd had already started chanting for a vote. Patty tried to object. Someone shouted her down. The meeting ended with the entire board suspended pending investigation, and a temporary council formed to oversee neighborhood issues until the next election. The next morning, my street felt different. Calmer. Like something heavy had been lifted. Neighbors waved who never even made eye contact before. One old man who always shuffled past my house without a glance actually stopped and thanked me. Said he used to be afraid of what might happen if he spoke up about the HOA. Said he'd watched what I did, and that it gave him courage. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Reaper sat by my feet the whole time, tail thumping like he knew what had changed even before I did. About a week later, I got a call from a woman named Darcy. Turns out she was a city administrator overseeing community affairs and had been quietly monitoring HOA abuses across the county. She asked if I'd be willing to consult on a review panel for revising enforcement policies in private neighborhoods. I laughed and told her I was just a guy trying to mow his lawn without a clipboard in his face. She said that's exactly why I was qualified. I told her I'd think about it. As for Patty, she disappeared. moved out quietly one night while most of the block slept. A for sale sign showed up on her lawn by morning. No goodbyes. No explanation. Just gone. Her nephews took plea deals, avoided jail time, but were banned from serving on any civic or neighborhood committee for 5 years. I heard one of them went back to selling protein powder and doing push-ups on Instagram. The HOA board was rebuilt with new faces, mostly from families who'd been ignored or steamrolled in the past. The bylaws were rewritten with actual oversight and zero tolerance for internal enforcement. The word military was scrubbed from every policy. On the 1-year anniversary of the raid, the neighborhood threw a small block party. No one mentioned it by name. But they all knew. It was in the way people gathered without tension. The way nobody looked over their shoulder for a patrol car that wasn't real. A couple of kids had set up a cardboard booth labeled HOA Officer Checkpoint, and they were charging people $1 to walk past without a warning. I paid twice and told them to raise their prices. As the sun set, I sat on my porch with a beer in hand, Reaper curled up beside me, and the sound of quiet laughter drifting down the street. No knocks. No fake badges. Just peace. The kind you don't get from rules or threats. The kind you earn. I didn't want thanks. I didn't want attention. I just wanted my home to be my home. But if anyone ever tried something like that again, I knew exactly how I'd respond. Not with anger. Not with revenge. Just with truth, precision, and the quiet confidence of a man who never needed to raise his voice to be heard. Because sometimes, all it takes is standing firm when others expect you to fold. And sometimes, the scariest thing you can be to bullies in uniform is calm.